Welcome to the Chatter Podcast. I'm your host, Jackie He. This episode, I'll be covering the article Relationships Between Religious and Scientific Worldviews in the Narratives of Western Buddhists Reporting Meditation-Related Challenges by Roman Politsky, David J. Cooper, Jared R. Lindell, and Wilby B. Britton. This was published in the Journal of Contemplative Studies on April 13th, 2023, just last year. I got this article from the Varieties of Contemplative Experiences website. I initially chose this article because I was interested in the world of adverse experiences that people encountered when practicing meditation. Whether this is mindfulness meditation or another tradition of meditation, adverse experiences seem to occur, but are frequently under-discussed or explained away, as explored in Anna Lukitis' The Dark Side of Dharma. This article isn't about the specific kinds of adverse experiences or the reasons why they're under-addressed. Instead, the article aimed to examine different ways the relationship between religion and science were described within the context of the varieties of contemplative experiences study. What really interested me about this article was that it was focused on the relationship between religion and science. People's attitudes and beliefs regarding religion and science play a massive part in how they experience and interact with the world around them. In this episode, I'm going to go over the paper in order with a mix of summary, analysis, and some personal thoughts thrown in. This is sort of in the style of when we summarize and discuss scientific articles in class. With that being said, let's begin. Meditation practices have expanded far beyond their original religious and historical context and have trended towards inclusion in the domains of science and medicine. Practitioners from the West are likely to participate in practices that have associations with both religious and scientific worldviews. Usually, a person doesn't experience conflict from their religious and scientific worldviews, but meditation-related challenges can disrupt this coexistence and make the specific relationship immediately more pertinent. In response, practitioners try to understand the how and why of these challenges. Their worldviews and narratives about religion and science allow them to interrogate and negotiate meaning from meditation-related challenges in ways that affect their beliefs and behaviors. In modernity, especially in the West, there are psychological and biomedical explanations as readily available as religious and spiritual ones. When practitioners negotiate their experience, they also negotiate religious and scientific discourses, along with how these two interact. So that was the first part of the article's introduction. I don't believe we've had a reading in class or a discussion about this particular topic, but I wish that we did. We certainly talked about how science played a much bigger role in the discussion of Buddhism in modernity and how modern Buddhism has been made to fit into a Western scientific analytical framework, but we did not address how religious and scientific frameworks interact with each other, especially in the case of a practitioner. This is a very personal and individual aspect of belief, and thought is a fascinating topic, and I would have really liked to have read some first-person accounts of this experience. The article moved on to discuss the current scholarship about the relationship between religion and science. It acknowledged that most of it had been informed by a cultural background of Abrahamic religions, so Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Additionally, the relationship between religion and science have often been characterized by conflict and incompatibility. Though the secularization hypothesis asserts that the advancement of technology industry, and essentially science, continues, religion will become less relevant. This is demonstrably untrue, as religion continues to have significant relevance in people's lives. Ian Barber's classification system includes 4 ideal typical relationships: conflict, where religion and science are mutually exclusive; independence, where specific questions or domains are relevant to one or the other; dialogue, which attempts to engage with religion or science on each other's terms, especially in areas where parallels can be drawn; and integration, where religious and scientific views are to be reconciled and function in common. To me, this section sums up or confirms a lot of assumptions I had about the literature on this topic. Much of it is working on the basis of religion as informed by the Abrahamic religions, most commonly Christianity. This reflects the prominence of Christianity in the world, but also speaks to how Christian-dominant Western society is, which is centered by Buddhist modernism. We've discussed in class how Western the movement feels, though of course it is not without contribution or participation by Eastern parties. I think it's also worth pointing out that the role of Buddhism as either religion or philosophy does not seem to fit well into Western classification. It's frequently touted as a secular school of thought or even a form of science to Western audiences, which makes it easier to integrate into a Christian-dominant framework. However, Buddhism has hallmarks of a faith or religion with its cosmology, the cycles of death and rebirth, karma, and things like that. When the current scholarship assumes religion to be Abrahamic, it no longer maps onto other religions as neatly, and I can see a good point for a study such as this one to be conducted, where it doesn't use Abrahamic religions as the benchmark of what is considered religious. The next section is titled Buddhist Meditation, Religious and Scientific Discourses, and the Influences of Buddhist Modernism. In this section, the authors discuss the history of Buddhist modernism, much of which we have already covered in class, and cite authors that we are familiar with, such as Donald Lopez, David McMahon, and Jon Kabat-Zinn. The section also touches on some of the criticisms that the class has come up with, such as how Buddhist modernism, especially the sides that emphasize the scientific nature of Buddhism, has twisted or ignored certain teachings, practices, and worldviews that are not compatible with modern science. Additionally, this separation from its cultural, because religion is a very cultural thing, context for the sake of Western palates could be a form of cultural imperialism that delegitimizes more traditional forms of Buddhism, which are mostly practiced by non-Western people. How exactly the dynamics between religion and science play out in contemporary Buddhist practitioners is not well understood. I really enjoyed how the authors gave a historical and social context for Buddhist modernism while also bringing up some of the larger criticisms against it. I feel that it provides a clear picture to the current environment regarding the topic in a way that previous readings have not fully addressed. Of course, class readings have been published at various points of time as these criticisms were being formed, but seeing most of it summed up succinctly was a nice refresher on topics first explored weeks ago in the course. This kind of investigation also really puts to the test the supposed compatibility of Buddhism and science, which I've always been a bit skeptical about. The next section is the methods. This paper used data from the Varieties of Contemplative Experiences website, which included participants that were meditation practitioners and meditation experts in the West who have experienced meditation-related challenges. The practitioners were originally sampled equally across Theravada, Zen, and Tibetan Buddhist traditions, but this study also used data from a replication study with an extra 9 participants from S.N. Goenka's Vipassana tradition. I think that the study had a good mix of Buddhist traditions, as Theravada, Zen, and Tibetan are the most popular or influential schools for Buddhist modernism. In David McMahon's chapter of Buddhism in the Modern World, he discussed the history of Buddhist modernism and the different sources that contributed to it. We've discussed in class how Buddhist modernism draws a lot from Theravada traditions, and how Tibetan traditions are very visible to the public eye and inform the public's perception of Buddhism. Zen, though a Mahayana tradition, was popularized by D.T. Suzuki in a similar manner as Theravada traditions were. The next section is the analysis. The authors developed and applied thematic categories to sections of the interviews, as this allowed a more nuanced analysis to encapsulate how multiple themes were observed within any given narrative. This reflected how people use a range of frameworks when they encounter meditation-related challenges to explain experiences and to guide them forward. These themes are not mutually exclusive and are commonly overlapping each other. An important step for the paper was the identification of science and religion. Participants in the study rarely explicitly invoked religion or science, so the authors categorized references based on whether the topic was something typically considered under the purview of religion or science. The examples used for references to science included medicine, scientific research, psychology, and rationality. The examples used for references to religion included states, stages, insights, and ultimate purposes and goals that are associated with religious practice. I like that the authors of the study used Buddhist or Buddhist-adjacent topics under the references to religion category. As previously stated, a lot of scholarship operates under an Abrahamic religions assumption, which would apply to Buddhist practices as well. Of course, this is not to say that there are no Abrahamic religious influences at all. Many people come from those religious backgrounds, and Western culture is heavily influenced by Christianity. It would be remiss to try to extract Buddhist modernism from any other religious influences, as they inform the context that Buddhist modernism exists in. The study even factors in topics that are associated with other religions, such as Hinduism and Christianity. The results of the study are 5 themes that categorize the relationship between religion and science. The first category is conflict. Religious and scientific frameworks are entirely or partly incompatible and require a choice to be made by a person for one of them. The second category is compatibility. Religious and scientific frameworks are integrated into a coherent worldview, and this integration is seen as unproblematic. Concepts are treated as equivalent. The third category is nested relationships. Both religious and scientific worldviews are accommodated, but one is prioritized over the other. Participants have described that one phenomenon is actually another to signal that there is a broader framework, and in that framework, religion or science is prioritized over the other. The fourth category is discrete domains. Religion and science are appropriate for different domains, such as soteriology or medicine, which supports a division of labor between frameworks. The fifth and last category is complementarity. Religious and scientific approaches enhance one another. This goes beyond compatibility in that religious and scientific positions are not only consistent, but should actually inform one another. I find these categories to be interesting. I wondered before about the relationship between religion and science, but it's hard to articulate all the many dimensions that relationships may take for people. These 5 categories are expansive, provide texture and depth, but are not exhaustive. And of course, they are not mutually exclusive. There's overlap, and people will employ different frameworks for the same situations. The next section is the discussion. The authors of the paper believe that their data showed how the relationship between religion and science should not be categorized as merely compatible or in conflict, as this was reductive. They also reaffirmed that their study described relations between religion and science in a group of Western Buddhists who have experienced meditation-related challenges. This is a narrow scope, but the findings could be relevant to the larger developments of theories on the relationship between religion and science. I wonder what the larger field might look like. I think one of the challenges of this topic is that there are many different religions, religious practices, and beliefs that people hold that might affect the relationship with science. As previously discussed, much of the scholarship is based on Abrahamic religions, but those religions have immense diversity unto themselves without any accounting for other religions. The themes proposed from the study do encapsulate several dimensions of that relationship, but categories must always maintain a level of broadness to be applicable on the larger scale. There always ends up with exceptions or outliers, and though I can't think of an example right now, I am interested in a case that would defy easy categorization. It's an interesting thought to entertain, and I think a good exercise to test the strengths of a classification system. The discussion ends with addressing the existential relevance of explanatory frameworks. There is a growing body of literature that explores how individuals' response to severe stressors and life disruptions highlights the importance of meaning-making. Worldviews and narratives serve the function of explaining the suffering people experience on an existential level. Religious and scientific worldviews are very effective in fulfilling this need to resolve uncertainty, but disruptions, such as meditation-related challenges, can threaten the stability and comfort these worldviews provide and instigate a reevaluation or further explanation for meaning that further defines the relationship between religion and science. Meditation-related challenges may be considered a double disruption. Meditation can typically serve as a buffer to the impact of existential threats, but meditation-related challenges can undermine this effectiveness. This is disruptive in 2 ways: the challenges themselves and the dissolution of a coping strategy. Ultimately, religious and scientific worldviews inform practitioners' decisions about their practice, the remedies they sought, and their lives more broadly. The findings of the study can be applied to a larger scale than the original narrow scope. The relationship between religion and science not only applies to meditation-related challenges, it applies to people's whole lives. This is the most interesting part of the paper to me. The importance of understanding the relationship between religion and science is part of understanding how people psychologically cope with the stress and uncertainty on a large existential scale. Religion and science are both able to provide comfort and soothe psychological dis-ease. They both answer the big questions people have, like why did this happen and what should I do now? Going back to my question of how compatible Buddhism and science are, I think this paper demonstrates how that question is not easily answered. The answer is different and nuanced in every person, even with a broader categorical framework that would draw similarities and classifications. What Buddhism and science mean to someone else may not mean the same to me. This is a question I think would have been fun to pose to the class, but I understand that it's a deeply personal question that people may not want to discuss. It's a topic I would love to pick someone's brain about, though. From my readings, Buddhist modernism and mindfulness meditation have been described as secular practices that provide tangible benefits that stray significantly from Buddhism's older cultural context. However, this paper demonstrates that other modern Buddhists, not Buddhist modernists necessarily, are still involved in practices with religious substance and identify with such. I wonder then, what religious topics might still be in Buddhist modernism and mindfulness meditation? That answer will vary from person to person, but I think some religious topics, such as spiritual states, might be present, and those might be manifest in things considered adverse experiences or meditation-related challenges. At least, that's my answer. That's all I have for this episode. I hope you join me next time, whenever that may be, on the Chatter Podcast. Bye!